Hey everyone, I'm back again with part 2 to my Yugioh Player Growth problem video that I spoke about in part 1. In the previous video, we spoke about the difficulties entering and playing Yugioh, along with the Yugioh player attrition issue. Feel free to check out part 1, and feel free to like, comment, and share this video, along with the previous video. And without any further ado, let's get into it. The next topic is probably one of the most shocking to me in terms of the experience I've had, but it's an issue that ultimately makes sense. And what I'm talking about is that there are some people who don't know that Yu-Gi-Oh still exists. Let's be real, Yu-Gi-Oh has had some increase in the player base during the pandemic, and even before, but Yu-Gi-Oh is far past its prime. Whether I like it or not, I can't accurately say that Yu-Gi-Oh is anywhere near as popular as it was back in the day, initially when it debuted. Yu-Gi-Oh used to be so popular that kids across the country and even across the world were scrambling to get Yu-Gi-Oh cards after the initial show's debut. If you were into Yu-Gi-Oh back then, you can remember the hunt to get cards like Exodia, Red Eyes Black Dragon, Dark Magician, and especially Blue Eyes White Dragon. And even if someone wasn't into Yu-Gi-Oh, they probably knew someone who was into Yu-Gi-Oh. It was a hit, and tons of people loved it. And it was so popular that many people bonded at school over playing Yu-Gi-Oh. This makes sense since the Pokemon card game was so popular around the same time, and it brought more attention to card games in general, but it also mainly brought in a younger audience. This was the time and the rise of widely popular trading card games, and I can even remember the days where Barnes & Noble had weekly Yu-Gi-Oh nights. And there was even a Yu-Gi-Oh event at my mall which hosted a tournament, and it even taught people how to play Yu-Gi-Oh. Yu-Gi-Oh's popularity was even more apparent since Yu-Gi-Oh action figures and merchandise were widely sold across popular toy stores everywhere. And this was especially true for the cards themselves. These cards were so sought after that the people tried their damnedest to steal the cards even at my school, and it was a real problem. But now, almost 20 years later, Yu-Gi-Oh doesn't really have widespread popularity, since you don't really see too much Yu-Gi-Oh related stuff or any Yu-Gi-Oh related merchandise in stores like they used to be. Yu-Gi-Oh events also don't have as much traction and relevance as they used to have. This can be seen by the absence of Yu-Gi-Oh events, such as Weekly Night Yu-Gi-Oh at Barnes & Noble. And you only really see events directly hosted by Konami or tournaments that aren't widely known to the mainstream audience, especially like they used to be in the past. And it's only really dedicated Yu-Gi-Oh fans that keep up with Yu-Gi-Oh in general, along with Yu-Gi-Oh events. However, you may find someone that plays Yu-Gi-Oh and you might get introduced to the game that way, but this is a stark difference from the past, since back then you probably knew more people who played Yu-Gi-Oh than people who didn't play Yu-Gi-Oh. So, to put things into perspective, back in the day, the typical conversation went something like, "Hey, you want to duel? What? You don't play Yu-Gi-Oh? Why not?" Now, if you find out someone who plays Yu-Gi-Oh, the conversation goes like, "Oh, that's cool, you play Yu-Gi-Oh? I remember that game." This phenomena was really put into perspective for me when I was playing Yu-Gi-Oh with a friend at the time at the nearby Carl's Jr. And yes, it's the same Carl's Jr. that I mentioned in my Yu-Gi-Oh horror stories videos. But we were playing a game at the Carl's Jr. booths next to the bathroom, and this one guy comes out of the bathroom and he instantly looks at our table where we have all of our stuff out, and the guy's face immediately lit up, and he asked us if those cards were Yu-Gi-Oh cards, and he said he remembered playing the game, but he didn't think it was still around. He was looking at our cards and he was amazed how different it was from when he remembered it back when he was playing it as a kid. He asked us different questions about the new extra deck cards and along with what they did, and we tried to explain as concisely as we could. He eventually thanked us for filling him in, and he went on his way, and we eventually wrapped up the match. But this experience may seem trivial to many people, though it was very sobering for me. And for me, it made me think about how Yu-Gi-Oh was viewed nowadays. And this instance really put into perspective just how Yu-Gi-Oh is viewed in the public eye. To me, I don't really think playing Yu-Gi-Oh is anything out of the ordinary, but to this guy, seeing us playing Yu-Gi-Oh was probably like seeing a unicorn. And I thought, here was this guy who previously knew about Yu-Gi-Oh! And the game, but he didn't even know about the game's presence in the current day. And this was back in 2019, and I thought that Yu-Gi-Oh's presence was still kind of known since we got Yu-Gi-Oh! Dark Side of Dimensions back in 2016. And Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links launch was probably one of the biggest Yu-Gi-Oh! Advertisements that I'd seen in a long time. But lo and behold, here was this former fan, and he didn't even know the game was still a thing. So this got me wondering, how do other people see the game? What do people think about Yu-Gi-Oh! Who have played it in the past? And how do everyday people perceive Yu-Gi-Oh? So it goes without saying, if this guy didn't even know about the game in general, what are the public going to think if they didn't even play Yu-Gi-Oh! To start with? And taking all of this into account, this is a huge stark contrast from the past, to say at least. But like I said, back in Yu-Gi-Oh's prime, people knew of Yu-Gi-Oh! Even though they didn't necessarily play the game or watch the show. But now Yu-Gi-Oh! Is kind of non-existent in the public's mind. What I mean is, it's no longer something that really is known except by the fans and the casual fans. And this really put the change in times into perspective for me. Back when I was a kid, I would frequently watch Saturday morning cartoons along with weekly cartoons which aired Yu-Gi-Oh! And I grew up in an age where TV and card games were popular mainly because of Pokemon's huge success. That was a facet of my childhood. But now, Saturday morning and weekly cartoons no longer have as much of an influence on younger audiences. And this has to do with the change in times where now younger audiences aren't really interested in card games, and they're interested in a different type of media in general. With the rise of the internet, and especially the smartphone revolution back in 2010, younger audiences are interested in things such as smartphones, social media, and especially video games, rather than card games like my generation was. Let's face it, the Yu-Gi-Oh! Fan base is all grown up. Many of Yu-Gi-Oh's target audience back in the day are now adults, and most of us are in our mid-20s or early 30s. The Yu-Gi-Oh! Fan base is getting older, and this really poses a question of how will Konami's Yu-Gi-Oh! Fan base grow. Yes, there can always be new fans introduced to the game, but they're usually adults, and they're only going to get older. And the point here is that Konami needs to appeal to a young audience, a very young audience again, so that they can ensure the longevity of the game, since I think Konami has been relying on their largely millennial fan base, who are now in their mid-20s and early 30s. And Konami can't really keep relying on this older fan base for much longer, since adult life can get very busy and complicated quick, which may have players inevitably leave the game since priorities can get in the way. And even if they have free time to play Yu-Gi-Oh, there are many reasons why people have quit the game or want to quit the game. And this older audience are more likely to quit since the years go by, especially if they become jaded, like I've talked about before in my video about why I think people quit Yu-Gi-Oh. And I really do think that Yu-Gi-Oh needs a new young fan base, just like they had back in the day, so that there's a new generation to extend the lifespan of the game, along with the community at large. Konami needs to reignite that initial rush for Yu-Gi-Oh, like that rush when everyone was excited for the first Yu-Gi-Oh movie. Just remember how much sense it made for Konami to release that movie back in the day, when Yu-Gi-Oh was at its prime. It was a big deal, and now the latest movie release feels like it's more of a movie release for a niche audience, rather than a movie release for a pop culture phenomena. I'm not saying that the appeal to Yu-Gi-Oh has to be as big as it was back then, but I'm saying that Yu-Gi-Oh's marketing needs to step it up and put it back on the map. Yu-Gi-Oh needs to reinvent itself, and it would be great if it was the talk of the town again, especially amongst the youth of today. And I think Yu-Gi-Oh needs to reinvent its image so that it can get younger audiences interested in Yu-Gi-Oh, like they're interested in smart devices today, or at least as close to it as possible. But those have been my thoughts for this two-part video series. Like I said, this video is what I wanted to talk about for a while, and it's a very real issue that Konami needs to be staring down if it wants to ensure the longevity of the game. But let me know what you think. How do you think Konami can resolve the Yu-Gi-Oh player growth problem? And tell me what your perception is of Yu-Gi-Oh now, if you've played Yu-Gi-Oh in the past or heard of Yu-Gi-Oh. I'm interested to hear what the public's perception of Yu-Gi-Oh currently is. And who knows, maybe I'll make another part that goes into more depth about this specific topic. But with that pretty much wraps up my main thoughts on this topic, and that wraps it up for this video. If you would like to support more content like this in the future, you can do so at my Necromancer 1040 Patreon link down below. I normally post it in the description, and you can check it there along with the other cool things I normally post down below. And with that, thank you so much for watching, thank you so much for your support, and I'll catch you in the next one. Alright, take care.